Kylie Jenner was dumped by Timothée Chalamet.
It always begins with a shift so subtle, so deceptively small, that no one notices it until the entire internet is already on fire. One missed event, one unanswered question, one photograph posted at the wrong moment, and suddenly, the perfectly polished illusion surrounding Kylie Jenner and Timothée Chalamet, the illusion people insisted would never survive longer than a season, begins to fall apart in real time. Their relationship was always a contradiction the world couldn't resist staring at. Kylie, a billionaire raised inside a media empire built on exposure. Timothée, the soft-spoken art house prodigy whose entire brand hinges on mystique. She represents curated visibility. He thrives on intentional silence. Together, they looked less like a couple and more like a temporary alignment of two universes that were never meant to share an orbit. So when Timothée's first crack appeared, his absence at Kris Jenner's monumental 70th birthday celebration, it felt less like a scheduling conflict and more like a fault line. A night designed to be a statement of power, family, and legacy. And the man Kylie has been quietly reshaping her life around simply wasn't there. No photographs, no sightings, no last-minute dash to make an appearance. Just a vague explanation labeled work commitments, which only intensified the suspicion. And it wasn't just about the event. The mood around Kylie shifted instantly. Paparazzi captured her arriving at the party with a stiffness in her expression that fans immediately decoded as disappointment. The woman who could manufacture a perfect smile on demand suddenly looked like someone trying to hold a narrative together with trembling fingers. But the moment that truly broke the facade didn't come from a red carpet or an uninvited paparazzi lens. It came from Timothée himself, in an interview far away from Los Angeles, far away from Kylie, and far away from the audience that had started rooting for their mismatched romance. When Vogue asked him about his personal life, Timothée didn't dodge the question with charm or diplomacy. He didn't offer the polite, glossy vagueness celebrities use to protect their relationships. Instead, he offered nothing, not even a gentle acknowledgement, not even a subtle hint. He said, "I don't have anything to say." And silence, in a world built on speculation, is never neutral. It is a message. Suddenly, rumors weren't whispers, they were wildfire. Blogs declared he had coldly cut ties. Fans dissected his body language. Insiders claimed Kylie was left speechless. And for the first time in months, the fairy tale storyline of their romance seemed to evaporate. It wasn't just that he didn't talk about her. It was how deliberately he refused to let her exist in his narrative at all. Because for Kylie, who has spent years adapting to the emotional climates of the men she loved, mirroring their aesthetics, softening her presence, reshaping her identity each time, Timothée's silence hit a deeper nerve. He was the first man whose world she couldn't quietly blend into, the first man whose reputation was too rooted in artistic purity to risk being reshaped by reality TV mythology. The first man who seemed to benefit from her proximity, yet refused to be defined by it. Kylie posted smiling selfies, aesthetic candids, textured fragments of her curated life, her signature move every time the internet tries to crawl under her skin. But this time, the cracks were visible, not in what she posted, but in what she didn't. No mention of Timothée, no denial, no reassurance, just silence, matching his. And in the vacuum between their two silences, the narrative began to write itself. He left. She didn't see it coming, and the fairy tale was never built to last. But the truth, as always, is more complex than the internet's favorite heartbreak fantasy. Because behind every rumor, every missing detail, every headline declaring their sudden collapse, there is a deeper story, one shaped by image, ambition, timing, and attention neither of them fully understood until now. Before anyone realized the story had shifted, the distance between Kylie and Timothée began to grow in the quiet, invisible places. Those places where relationships actually live or die. Not on red carpets, not in public sightings, but in the subtle changes that happen when two people begin moving at different speeds without acknowledging it. For Kylie, the connection had become a kind of escape. Timothée represented a world untouched by the noise she was raised in. Around him, she could exist without the weight of constant cameras or family expectations. For once, she wasn't the billionaire beauty mogul or the youngest child of a reality empire. She was simply a woman in her 20s, laughing in dimly lit restaurants and slipping into New York alleyways where no one cared about her last name. But what she considered a breath of fresh air, he perceived as temporary oxygen. Because Timothée was entering a season of his life where everything mattered, every interview, every appearance, every whisper about his talent. His Oscar campaign for Marty Supreme had begun long before the public realized it, and the stakes were higher than anything he'd navigated before. When an actor chases that kind of prestige, their world shrinks. Every relationship becomes a calculation. What adds weight? What subtracts credibility? What shifts perception? And while Kylie believed she was becoming part of his world, he was quietly retreating from hers. The first sign came during their long-distance stretch. Kylie, used to partners who lived in her city, found herself adjusting to time zones, production schedules, and Timothée's increasingly unbroken focus. Their calls grew shorter, their messages less frequent. Sometimes days passed before he responded, not with coldness, but with the effortlessly apologetic charm that never explained anything and never promised it wouldn't happen again. Yet Kylie didn't push. She rarely does. She has learned over years of loving men who operated on their own terms that confrontation only exposes her deeper fear, that she wants more than the other person does. And this time, that fear wasn't wrong. Because while she was softening for him, mirroring his simplicity, easing into the quieter rhythm he preferred, Timothée was negotiating his future. Publicists warned him about overexposure. Agents hinted that high art roles do not blend well with celebrity romances. Studio executives subtly reminded him that the mysterious, untouchable aura is his greatest currency. Everywhere he turned, the message was the same: distance is good, silence is better, clean separation is ideal. Kylie didn't know any of this, of course. What she knew was that he was drifting, that he no longer asked her to visit unless she initiated the trip, that he skipped her mother's milestone birthday without offering the kind of reassurance she needed, even privately, to feel secure. Instead, she walked into the party alone, a symbolic detail that was never meant to be symbolic, and felt the shift rip through her in a way she couldn't articulate. The Kardashian Jenner women never show weakness publicly, but around them, absence is louder than presence, and his absence screamed. Still, she didn't expect the Vogue interview to become the breaking point. She knew he guarded his privacy. She admired it, but she didn't anticipate that his refusal to acknowledge anything about his personal life would feel like a silent erasure of everything they had built. Not even a gentle nod, not even a vague expression of happiness, just a clean surgical distancing that left her nowhere in his public narrative. And the part that truly cut wasn't what he said. It was the ease with which he said it. As if the relationship existed only in the places the cameras couldn't see, as if acknowledging her would disrupt something he valued far more than intimacy: momentum. Kylie has lived her entire adulthood inside narratives written by other people, but this time the story hurt because she didn't recognize her role in it. She thought she had finally found a calm, steady affection. She didn't realize she was falling for someone in the middle of reinventing himself, someone who couldn't carry her with him into the next chapter, no matter how much she tried to fit into the margins. And while the internet screamed, dissected, and theorized, the simplest truth sat quietly beneath the headlines. Timothée wasn't cruel. He was focused, and Kylie wasn't betrayed. She was blindsided. The unraveling had already begun. By the time the Vogue interview dropped, the internet had already built its own emotional scaffolding around Kylie and Timothée's situation. But his silence in that article didn't just deepen the speculation, it reshaped it entirely. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even dismissive on the surface. It was quiet in the kind of way that feels intentional, the kind of quiet that forces people to read the empty spaces between the words. When the interviewer pressed him about his personal life, the kind of question most stars brush aside with a cheerful, "I'm happy," or a diplomatic nod, Timothée didn't even give the bare minimum. He offered nothing. Not a hint of acknowledgement, not a single breadcrumb for fans, not even the vanilla line celebrities use when they're trying to appear mysterious. And because he refused to give even a fragment, people filled the void with the worst-case scenario, that the distance wasn't an oversight, it was a message. It didn't help that Kylie had spent years being studied under the microscope of her relationships. People have watched her shift, soften, harden, reinvent, and recalibrate, depending on the emotional temperature of whoever she was next to. When she dates a rapper, she leans into streetwear and secrecy. When she dates an actor with prestige heat, she leans into quiet luxury and minimalism. She adapts, not because she lacks identity, but because she's constantly navigating a world that expects her to be both the brand and the woman behind it. And Timothée's silence landed on her public history like a spark looking for a fuse. The Vogue moment wasn't the only catalyst. Fans had been watching the small details, the missed appearance at Kris Jenner's birthday, the shift in Kylie's online tone, the uncharacteristically isolated arrival at a family event. These weren't explosive signs, they were subtle, quiet disruptions, the kind that when stacked together begin to look like a pattern. The fact that Kylie still liked his film promo post confused the narrative even more. Some saw it as a clapback, a sly "we're fine." Others saw it as the digital equivalent of holding on to something that might already be slipping away. But what really fueled the fire was the contrast between their brands. Timothée is positioned as Hollywood's golden boy, beloved by critics, adored by the fashion elite, and carefully managed to appear above the noise of traditional celebrity drama. Kylie, on the other hand, is someone who built an empire in the very storm he avoids. She comes from a family where every conflict, reunion, betrayal, and triumph becomes a storyline. Their worlds were never symmetrical, so when he stayed silent, aggressively silent, it didn't just feel like a refusal. It felt like a separation, like he was drawing a line between the seriousness of his upcoming Oscar push and the public realities of dating a woman who lives in a universe where everything becomes content. Whether that was his intention or not, perception took over. Social media spun his quiet into cruelty, his distance into rejection, his professionalism into personal commentary. And somewhere in that digital chaos, Kylie became the face of the narrative, the woman blindsided again, the woman whose vulnerability sits too close to the surface for fans to ignore, the woman who keeps choosing partners who don't always choose her with the same public certainty. It didn't matter that none of this was confirmed. The internet wasn't responding to facts, it was responding to the story it thought it recognized. A story about a glamorous romance that looked perfect in photos, but cracked the moment real-world pressures entered the room. A story about two people whose lives are shaped by fame in completely different ways. A story about silence and how devastating it becomes when you're the only one caught inside it. What ultimately pushed the narrative into full-blown chaos wasn't the skipped party, the interview silence, or even the swirling breakup rumors. It was the emotional imbalance people felt radiating from the situation. Kylie Jenner, for better or worse, has lived her entire adult life in a world where affection is proven through presence, acknowledgement, and clarity. Timothée Chalamet, on the other hand, has built a career on the power of distance, the mystique, the restraint, the refusal to let the public inside. Those two energies collided in a way neither of them seemed prepared for, because while Kylie projected lightness online, the curated photos, the soft glam, the carefully crafted moments of joy, there was an uncomfortable truth slipping through the seams. She was the one carrying the emotional weight of speculation, while Timothée benefited from appearing untouched. She was the person the public dissected, psychoanalyzed, pitied, and critiqued. He remained an enigma, protected by the exact machine that complicated their relationship in the first place. This imbalance made the rumor feel heavier than it should have. People weren't responding to a breakup story, they were responding to a pattern where Kylie gives herself fully to relationships that exist in conflicting worlds. A pattern where she becomes the emotional center of the narrative, while the men she dates remain largely unbothered in the public eye. A pattern where she appears to want stability, while the person she chooses exists in an environment that thrives on fragmentation and solitude. Timothée's world rewards quiet ambition, selective intimacy, and a carefully controlled image. Kylie's world demands transparency, emotional performance, and a willingness to let your heart be consumed by millions of spectators. These differences don't make either of them wrong, they simply reveal how fragile a relationship becomes when the foundation is built across two empires, shaped by opposite rules. And then there was the detail that broke the illusion for many fans, the birthday party. For the Kardashian-Jenner clan, family events are not just celebrations, they're rituals. They're where loyalty is shown, alliances are displayed, and relationships become official. When Timothée didn't appear, it wasn't merely a scheduling conflict. It symbolized a detachment that Kylie couldn't explain away. Regardless of his intentions, it reinforced the public belief that she was more invested, more exposed, and more emotionally vulnerable. Meanwhile, Timothée's team doubled down on the narrative of career focus, artistic priorities, and emotional privacy, a subtle reminder that his life was not structured around the same expectations hers was. Kylie, caught between projecting confidence and managing humiliation, tried to hold her dignity in place with quiet gestures, like the Instagram like that fans clung to as proof of stability. But beneath it all lived a truth that felt universally relatable. She looked like someone who tried harder than the person she was trying for, and that is why the internet reacted so intensely, not because they had definitive proof of a breakup, but because they recognized the emotional architecture of the situation. They saw a woman who kept showing up and a man who preferred to stay in the shadows. They saw mismatched expectations disguised as compatibility. They saw a romance that was beautiful in photographs but brittle in reality. Whether the relationship is still intact or quietly dissolving behind closed doors, one thing has become painfully clear: the public isn't invested in the truth of their love story. They're invested in what it reveals about Kylie, her longing for connection, her vulnerability behind the brand, and her tendency to fall for people whose lives are built on a very different kind of light. And in this storm of speculation, the only undeniable fact is this: the silence between them is now louder than anything either has said aloud.